So just a few days ago, I made a prediction that Assassin's Creed Shadows, despite being a good game and performing above expectations, wouldn't really change Ubisoft's fate. I said in that video this: they're at risk of corporate restructurings, of some crazy financial maneuverings, which is currently being speculated about. Basically, it looks like the Guillemot family might make a separate entity, move some of the IP into that entity, make that entity half owned by the Guillemot family trust, which is how all of the brothers own it. And then Tencent will own half of that. And that's how they'll get themselves out of that. And what they plan on doing then is something that like private equity firms do all the time, which is to basically take the debt from certain companies and move it to other companies under their leadership, and then turn that company belly up and basically dump all of the bad assets there and keep all of the good assets over in this other company. It sounds really complicated. Basically, you're just kind of playing the shuffle cup game with the ball under the cup. You're basically just doing that with the valuable assets under one cup, and then you try to get rid of the other ones. And now here we are. Ubisoft has announced that they are accelerating its transformation by laying foundation for a new operating model with the creation of a new subsidiary and injection of 1.16 billion euros of cash from Tencent. I'll get into the specifics of this, what this actually means for the company, but like I would say that I hate to say I told you so, but I really like to say I told you so. People said I was a hater of like AC Shadows because I was saying, no, it's not going to change anything. They're still going to reorganize as a corporate company. Like they just have to. They don't really have a choice. People said I was being a hater. People said that I was being unreasonable. I didn't know what I was talking about. And here we are. So we're going to get into the details of this. I'm going to explain what this actually means because there's a lot of details, as you can see, in terms of what they're actually doing here. And I'm going to break it down for you as best I can as someone who, I know I say it all the time, but I'll just tell you again, I have a degree in corporate finance specifically. So this is kind of my bread and butter. And I'll try to make it as easy to understand as I can. But buckle up because things are a-changing within Ubisoft. I think for the better. But real quick, before we get into the details, quick thank you to our sponsor, Incogni. Incogni is the tech company that allows you to scrub your information from publicly available lists that collect individuals' phone numbers, email addresses, and even physical mailing addresses. You ever get one of those like scam calls, or you get a piece of junk mail and you're like, how did they even get my information? It's because your information is brokered and sold all over the internet, everywhere you can imagine. And that's why a service like Incogni can be so important. With Incogni, all you have to do is put your information in, the information that you want removed from all these sites, and using their automated tools can request your information be removed from all of these sites. Furthermore, they can even do follow-ups, as you can see on this, which is my account, with all of the takedown information requests that are both in progress and that have been successful. You can see that they went through the initial requests. They show when the last request was completed. They show whether they need to do another one, a follow-up. They keep track of all of this with their automated tools, so you just set it up and you can move on with your life. And as you can see, they project, just since I started using them, they've saved me over 400 hours, which is the amount of time it would typically take for me to fill out these takedown requests myself. It's brilliant. Not just for somebody in sort of a public facing position as a YouTuber, but also just for everyday people that don't want their information on like telemarketers lists or junk mail lists or political lists. Like if you just want to live your life without that, check them out at the link in the video description box below, and make sure to use my promo code to save 60% off of an annual plan. Again, can't recommend them enough. It's awesome. So this whole thing is really wordy and kind of tough to decipher if you don't already know kind of what's going on. So let me paint the picture of what led us here. Basically, if you have Ubisoft as a company, as a big pie, this company is owned, at least in part, by the Guillemot family, the founding brothers that are Yves Guillemot and all of his brothers and cousins and nephews and nieces that populate the upper ranks of the company. Their chunk of the company is then owned basically like 49-51 between Tencent and the Guillemot family. So if Tencent owns this sliver, the Guillemot family owns this sliver. And as part of the Tencent organization coming in and buying this chunk of the company like 4 or 5 years ago, Tencent agreed that they could not buy any more shares of the company over here to increase their stake above 10%. This was something the Guillemot family did to prevent Tencent from buying them out completely because they don't want to be bought out completely. And so it limited what Tencent could actually do. People have asked me all the time over on my live streams, Luke, why doesn't Tencent just buy out Ubisoft completely? They have the money, and they absolutely do, but they signed a deal saying they can't unless the Guillemot family approves of it, which they obviously won't, because then they'll all be out of jobs. So they've been at a weird sort of standstill where Tencent doesn't want to put more money into the company unless they gain a bigger like royalty base, a bigger share of equity, more control. Like naturally, they're not just going to throw money at the Guillemot family for nothing. And so they've basically just been in a stalemate waiting for somebody to twitch, and it seems like somebody finally did. You see, what they're doing is they're actually creating a separate new entity, a secondary company basically, that is owned in part by Tencent and the rest by Ubisoft, the company, and then that organization, that new thing, is what's going to own effectively the IP of Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, and Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six brands. You can see they describe it as this new entity will include the teams developing Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six, Assassin's Creed, and Far Cry franchises. It includes those teams based in Montreal, Quebec, Sherbrooke, Saguenay, Barcelona, and Sofia, as well as the back catalog and any new games currently under development or to be developed. So this new subsidiary owns all of that. And the new subsidiary will be granted by Ubisoft, the corporation, a worldwide, exclusive, irrevocable, perpetual license in respect of the intellectual property and similar proprietary rights owned or licensable by Ubisoft in relation to Rainbow Six, AC, Far Cry, in exchange for a royalty. And this organization has been valued at roughly 4 billion euros. And Tencent is injecting 1.16 billion euros of cash into this new entity to gain 25% economic interest or equity in the new subsidiary. All of this basically just means this new entity will hold and effectively own the IP of AC, of Rainbow Six, and of Far Cry. That means those IP are now controlled by that subsidiary and not technically by Ubisoft, the corporation. That means now the development of AC, Far Cry, and Rainbow are totally agile. They are free from the limits and bounds of Ubisoft, the corporation. They can do whatever they really want to or need to. And then that organization and subsidiary pays a royalty to Ubisoft. If this sounds needlessly complicated, I totally get that. I totally understand. Okay, this does sound really complicated. It's like, why wouldn't Tencent just give them $1 billion and gain a bigger stake of Ubisoft? Well, that's described later on in the document. Let me show you, because they thought of that. So first of all, they say that the new subsidiary will have a dedicated leadership team separate from Ubisoft's leadership, supervised by a board of directors focused on enhancing creative vision and streamlining operations with the authority to make swift, high impact decisions across development. That sounds like layoffs to me. Marketing and distribution to ensure these brands continue to evolve, attract new audiences, and deliver groundbreaking gaming experiences for years to come. Tencent would benefit from a customary minority protection rights as well as certain consent rights on the disposals of the important new subsidiary assets. The more you read this, and if you translate it out of corporate speak, it starts to sound like this new entity has been designed so that they can not just like greenlight and expedite projects and do all sorts of stuff without having to adhere to like regulations or governmental agreements that Ubisoft, the corporation, made, but also they can do major layoffs, restructurings, and all sorts of things that will then benefit the balance sheet of Tencent, and then also indirectly Ubisoft, because they wouldn't necessarily be responsible for it. It's a lot of corporate shenanigans. Certainly, this is something that private equity firms have done for years and years and years. It's unfortunately very, very common, but none of this is new. I mean, if you went to business school, you studied companies that do this kind of thing all the time. Other provisions in relation to Tencent's shareholding in the new subsidiary notably include, and this is important, this shows they really didn't want Tencent taking over the company, a 5-year lockup undertaking on new subsidiary shares held by Tencent unless Ubisoft the corporation, not the Guillemot family, Ubisoft the corporation, no longer owns a majority of new subsidiary voting rights and share capital. That's interesting. That makes me think they might be entertaining the possibility of other investments in this new subsidiary. Maybe like Microsoft throws $1 billion in and gets to own 25% too. You never know. They go on to say Ubisoft may not cease to hold a majority of new subsidiary voting rights and share capital for a 2-year period. So at least 2 years Ubisoft is in complete control. Customary share transfer provisions, including a right of first refusal to the benefit of Ubisoft, a right of first offer to the benefit of Tencent, tag-along right to benefit of Tencent, and drag-along right to the benefit of Ubisoft, subject to certain conditions. Basically, they're laying the groundwork so if other partners eventually come in, they still have an advantage over all of them. Call option to the benefit of Ubisoft and put option to the benefit of Tencent in the event of certain change of control of Ubisoft approved by its board of directors. Exercise price will be higher, the higher of the fair market value of new subsidiary shares and the same EBIT multiple as that in the change of control transaction of Ubisoft, it being specified that for the call option, there will be a specific minimum price protection during the first 4 years following the closing of the transaction with Tencent. Really complicated way of just saying that they're trying to guarantee the investment of Tencent so they don't end up in the position they are right now, which is to say that they put in millions upon millions upon millions of dollars into Ubisoft a handful of years ago when their valuation was way, way higher, when their stock price was way, way higher. And the stock price has plummeted since then. And naturally, I'm sure Tencent isn't super thrilled about that. And so these are all protections that are supposed to basically give them options, as you can see described here, with the call options to the benefit of Ubisoft and put options to the benefit of Tencent, which makes sense. I mean, I'm sure that was that was something Tencent insisted on after they got kind of screwed the last time. Now, the other interesting thing about this is that they insist several times that they did not come to this conclusion by themselves. They actually hired an outside financial firm to help them analyze their financial situation. It's a company called Finexi, I think is how you pronounce it. It's basically a French financial firm that goes and consults, and basically they are brought in to look at a company's financial health and go, oh baby, we got to fix this. This is how we do it. And they said this was the best option for both parties, for Tencent and Ubisoft. But you know what? Okay, let's just break this down as like simple as we can. It allows them to get more cash, which Ubisoft wants and kind of needs to just keep the gears flowing from, Daddy Warbucks Tencent. And it also allows them to get that cash without giving Tencent any more direct ownership in Ubisoft, the corporation, which of course the Guillemot family also does not want to relinquish. It allows Ubisoft and the Guillemot family to retain control of Ubisoft and of this new subsidiary. Tencent only owns 25% of it, which they obviously like there. They leave the door open for other entities, corporations, investment groups, whatever, to buy out bigger chunks of this new entity as well to get even more cash to come in while retaining control. And because Tencent is investing over $1 billion in this new entity, which values it at over $4 billion US dollars, that means that this new entity is ripe for new debt, for new loans, for new leases. All sorts of things can be done through this new entity separate from Ubisoft. So they've basically managed to shed all of the weight, the albatross around their neck, and grow into a new company that's still owned by the original one, but can be viewed financially as independent. And so, broad strokes, everything, whittled down. This is basically just as I predicted, a corporate reshuffling to create a separate entity that's more agile, that's more financially stable, and is not weighed down by all the other nonsense that Ubisoft has been caught up with. This unfortunately likely means that all of the teams not involved in these core 3 franchises are on thin ice. Unfortunately, that's just the reality. Ubisoft for years has been a company that is massive, that's been kept afloat basically entirely by Assassin's Creed and Rainbow Six. In years past, they had other franchises which could help. They had things that were doing very well like The Division or Watch Dogs, but nowadays the entire roughly 19,000 employee company is kept afloat basically by 3 IP. And with this move, thousands of employees will be moved into this new entity. And it seems as though that new entity will become their employer. Still, technically, they are employed by Ubisoft because Ubisoft owns that entity, but they'll be moved over there. But that leaves a question for all the other thousands of employees that are not at those studios. What happens to them? And at this point, we don't really know. Tom Henderson on Insider Gaming just posted the memo that Yves Guillemot posted for his employees. It basically goes through everything that we just went through as well. And understandably, as he says, employees are now nervous. In a follow-up email, Marie-Sophie de Walbert, Chief Studios and Portfolio Officer, said in a follow-up email, basically, like, first and foremost, I want to emphasize that the agreement was announced as a powerful enabler and an exciting opportunity for Ubisoft. It'll help us accelerate, blah, 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 as you would expect. They acknowledge, like, of course, this brings some uncertainty and questions. Right now, we may not have all the detailed answers, but we are committed to communicating with you transparently and regularly. Supporting you through this transition is the top priority for your local and global leadership teams. Don't hesitate to reach out to them and stay tuned locally. Usual or dedicated studio times will be good forums, blah, blah, blah. I would guess that this means that the core studios, the core franchises are largely like, okay, Assassin's Creed still doing a lot of crazy numbers. Of course, Rainbow is doing crazy numbers, and they expect Far Cry to do crazy numbers when that eventually launches. Everything else, though, I think is in major jeopardy. There will be restructurings and massive reorganizations within the teams. That doesn't necessarily mean direct layoffs, but it probably does mean that teams are rearranged and job titles are swapped and all sorts of stuff like that. But this was written in the stars years ago. I mean, as I said in a video like a handful of days ago, you can't have years of mismanagement and expect one hit to just erase all of that. Again, the best example to bring up in the games industry directly is Warner Brothers games. For years, they mismanaged their portfolio and IP. And yeah, they eventually had Hogwarts Legacy, which did over $1 billion. But even that wasn't enough to save David Haddad and his whole leadership team over at Warner Brothers. They had to fix it. They had to reorganize, shut studios down and reorganize, because years of mismanagement don't just get forgotten with one success or one pretty good launch. You need major reformation in order to fix the company. And that's seemingly what they're doing here. So there we have it. It realistically just means that in the next year or so, you'll hear rumblings of like, ooh, this team has been reorganized at Ubisoft Montreal or Quebec, or, oh, this project's been moved, this team has been shut down, but the project has moved over here. There will be stuff like that. And they'll kind of try to untangle the knots that they've tied themselves into. But the company itself, I think, is in a better position. Certainly after today, I think it signals that at least they have many doors open, especially for cash infusion from Tencent, which is what they've needed. And they found a way to do that without giving Tencent more ownership, which was the big hurdle that the Guillemot family did not want to get over. They just did not want to open the door to Tencent gaining more equity. So they found a way to do it. Hooray. But time will tell how this actually affects like the quality of games and game releases. But realistically, for the consumer, we still get Black Flag Remake. We probably still get, Assassin's Creed Hexe. We still get all of those things they've already announced, because those are the few things that actually make them money. So we're going to get that. It's not like Assassin's Creed is going under or anything. This was something that, people like me were able to predict months ago, because it just was so plainly needed. And that's why it's not anything that's like a big pat on my back for getting this right. Like anybody who had a basic understanding of corporate financials could see that this was necessary, but I guess maybe that is more of an uncommon skill set than I expected, but there you go. So if you like the video and if you want to see me predict more things in the games industry, make sure to subscribe and like the video, because as I said, I would say, I hate to say I told you so, but I I mean, I'll tell you what, I really like saying it. It feels good, especially after people were quite nasty. So there you go. But with that said, everybody, much love. I'll see you soon in the next video. Hugs and kisses. Bye-bye.